You're watching This Week in Louisiana Politics with Fred Childers.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Fred Childers. We hope you're having a great weekend. Thanks for joining us for This Week in Louisiana Politics on your local election headquarters. A big legal win for Louisiana's Attorney General Jeff Landry, and it appears this one might stick. After a lengthy battle, a federal judge has permanently reversed President Biden's halt on new oil and gas leases. The judge issued the permanent injunction saying the president exceeded his authority. Landry said in response to the decision, quote, Biden's energy policies have crushed American families with higher energy bills for their homes and vehicles. Now, this permanent injunction comes more than a year after the preliminary injunction was issued, and that was back in June of 2021. New Orleans Mayor LaToya Cantrell and her team are criticizing recall efforts as petition signing events ramp up across social media. They allege conservatives from the Capitol are spearheading what they call a witch hunt. Recall organizers report last week's petition signing event in Lakeview brought in over 2,000 signatures in just 3 hours. Cantrell's campaign spokesperson released a statement saying, quote, the recall effort to undermine and discredit the first black woman mayor of New Orleans is quickly being exposed as a Republican-backed maneuver by people with an agenda. They went on to say, we have reason to believe a conservative D.C. firm has signed on to lead the effort. Calls to stop juvenile inmates from being housed at Angola continue as the legal fight carries on. Youth justice allies rallied on the steps of the Capitol, on the state capitol, to demand Governor Edwards to pause the transfer. Jessica Knox brings us the details.
Youth justice advocates started their rally here at the Office of Juvenile Justice Center and trailed all the way to the Capitol steps to deliver the message that no child belongs at Angola.
What our youth need is therapy, education, community, and healing.
Advocates believe the delay is not enough. They have collected over 1,200 signatures demanding Governor John Bel Edwards cast aside moving the youth from Bridge Center to Angola. They instead want the youth invested in. One mother says her worst fear is the day her son calls her saying he is being moved.
We expect services that they promised us and they're not getting.
16-year-old Annika Bonilla is incarcerated at the Bridge City Youth Center, and she wants help.
We don't have people to look up to or to hear us. The school systems are set to fail us. We don't really have teachers who care enough.
Plaintiff's attorney Ron Haley served an injunction. He believes Angola will never be the answer, especially when officials are still saying it's a work in progress.
The fact that you can make an announcement on July 19th the kids are going to Angola, and yet we're about 2 weeks away from that deadline hitting, and the plan is still a work in progress. We're not even fully staffed. What we received is essentially a blueprint.
They say the next step is fighting in court on September 6th and September 7th. Reporting at the Capitol steps, Jessica Knox, NBC Local 33 News.
In St. Gabriel, elected officials broke ground for the new Louisiana Correctional Institute for Women. The $149 million facility will be placed next to the Hunt Correctional Center that flooded back in 2016. 1,000 women were evacuated during the floods and have been housed in multiple different facilities since. The new facility will have 938 beds and will take about 2 years to build.
It will be built to withstand a 500-year flood. And we're going to build it in a way, Sheriff, that we don't exacerbate flooding problems in this area.
The new women's facility is the first prison built in more than 3 decades. Raymond Laborde Correctional Center has the last prison built by the state. It began operating in the summer of 1989. Baton Rouge has 40,000 active arrest warrants, according to a recent study published by a group of civil rights organizations. They say that many warrants make the community unsafe. Ariel Salk reports.
Have 40,000 active warrants. You have a less safe system.
The Fair Fight Initiative, NAACP of EBR, and others speak on a recent study claiming Baton Rouge has 15 times the national average of warrants.
If Baton Rouge eliminated every warrant that's older than 6 months, we would still be higher than the national average.
1 out of 3 households in Baton Rouge having an active warrant is atrocious. And if we don't work to change that, then we don't want to work to change mass incarceration.
The group says the majority of the warrants are for low-level crimes like traffic violations. 89% are older than 1 year, some dating back to the 70s.
So many are outdated, totally old.
Linda Franks with the Fair Fight Initiative says her son was arrested on a low-level warrant in 2015.
That required that he be detained in the East Baton Rouge Parish Jail, and 4 days later he was dead. And if we had had this process in place when my son was pulled over, he would still be alive today.
Advocates say the solution? To vacate non-felony warrants older than 6 months, all non-violent felony warrants older than a year, and warrants that would not result in a jail sentence.
What we want to do is to get rid of the stuff that shouldn't be a concern, that isn't a public safety risk, and have police focus on the stuff that matters to make our community really safer.
Ariel Salk, NBC Local 33 News.
Next week, the Department of Children and Family Services will face more questioning from state officials, most likely some very pointed questions. This comes as the agency faces legal action after the overdose death of a 2-year-old. The agency is scheduled to meet with the Senate Committee on Health and Welfare on Tuesday at 10 a.m. We'll be there for that. After the arrest of the mother whose 2-year-old son died after ingesting fentanyl, DCFS said it launched an internal review into the case. During questioning in August, DCFS officials said the agency is severely understaffed and underfunded. Governor John Bel Edwards announced that Louisiana is the first state to receive grant awards to expand internet service statewide. This is part of the state's initiative to bring broadband to the more rural areas. The governor also says $35 million will be distributed over the next 2 years to bring high-speed internet to 15,000 locations. This is just the first phase of the Granting Unserved Municipalities Broadband Opportunities Program, and more applications will be accepted later down the road. Louisiana is also getting an additional $100 million to put towards infrastructure projects. The additional money came from extra funds that other states did not use. Congressman Garrett Graves says, quote, the Capital Region has some of the worst traffic in America, and these funds should go toward traffic solutions and laying the groundwork for a new bridge crossing the Mississippi River. It is not immediately known what the extra money will go towards, but it will be up to DOTD. Thousands of Louisianans struggle with mental health every day. With September beginning Suicide Prevention Month, Shannon Hecht spoke with a lawmaker who looks to make sure children are learning about the impacts of mental health.
Act 650 by Representative Royce Duplessis requires mental health to be taught in K-12 classrooms.
Kids are experiencing trauma. Kids are experiencing all kind of depression, and we want to give kids outlets to get the kind of resources, whether it be through therapy or just being able to express themselves creatively.
The Louisiana Department of Education says they are working on educational materials and will take the new policy to BESI in October for approval. It's expected the lessons will begin in the next school year. Each lesson will be age appropriate, but the goal is to start teaching kids young about how mental health can impact them and their families.
We're all seeing instances of young people either being bullied and not knowing how to respond, being distant from their classmates through COVID and not knowing how to cope from that.
According to the National Association of Mental Illness, 1 in 5 adults struggle with mental health. Half of all lifetime cases of mental illness begin around age 14.
Suicide is the 3rd leading cause of death for people aged 10 to 24. And also suicide was the 4th leading cause of death in Louisiana in 2020.
With improving education on how to identify and address mental health, the hope is to keep kids from dropping out of school and not ending up in juvenile detention. The Department of Health is also ramping up a number of programs to get people in touch with mental health resources. Shannon Hecht, Fox 44 News.
Following the announcement, the Biden administration is trying to strengthen Title IX to protect students from discrimination based on sex, gender identity, and sexual orientation. However, Louisiana's state superintendent is telling schools they don't have to follow the proposed changes. Superintendent Kate Brumley writes that the enforcement is premature as the executive order is in the public comment phase. Brumley says the Louisiana Department of Education does not agree with the changes and says they are not enforceable. Well, the state will be sending 300 travel trailers to Kentucky to help house flood victims. The trailers were originally purchased for Hurricane Ida survivors. Kentucky's governor stated, unfortunately, folks in Louisiana know the pain and devastation of natural disasters all too well. But despite all they've been through themselves, this state is still choosing to pay it forward. Now more families in Kentucky will have quicker access to intermediate housing. Louisiana originally purchased the travel trailers. However, they are seeking cost reimbursement from FEMA. Coming up this week marked a couple of natural disaster anniversaries. We'll take a look at the huge impact they had on our state. That's next. Stay with us.
This is your local election headquarters.
Welcome back. This last week was the 17th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, bringing utter devastation to Louisiana. We take a look at some of the memorial services that took place over the week. LBJ brings us to the 9th Ward.
Ella Beard, Sonia Beard,
A traditional African ceremony of calling the ancestors and those that were lost was a part of the remembrance during the 17th annual Katrina Memorial in the Lower 9th Ward.
This day means to me is honoring my aunt, Joyce Green, who perished on a rooftop on Tennessee Street along with her great-grandbaby.
Joyce Green's name was among dozens posted on the signs near the levee breach. And while some of the residents of the 9th Ward were able to leave, many faced a tough time getting back to a community they no longer recognized.
I left some neighbors that didn't want to go, and I thought sure we was going and going to return back home. But apparently we didn't.
The recovery of parts of the 9th Ward has been spotty at best, and vacant lots occupy as many plots as homes rebuilt. But this is a proud community.
And if you look at what Katrina did, just to see that this neighborhood still survives and it still exists, man, I'm proud to be from this community.
The remembrance then became a march and eventually a second line in tribute to what still lives in the hearts of people here.
It's like a memory that comes to you at the day it happened.
And while this commemoration is a tribute, some also see it as a call to action.
As we approach almost 2 decades, we have to figure out, number one, how this never happens again, and two, how we make the people that are still affected whole.
So Ashe.
That was LBJ reporting. In St. Bernard Parish at the Hurricane Katrina Memorial in Shell Beach, they held a special ceremony there to honor the 164 lives lost in St. Bernard during Katrina. Every year it is tradition to toss that flower wreath in the water and read the names of all the Katrina victims. Local leaders, including Lieutenant Governor Billy Nungesser, were there to pay their respects, as were members of the community.
Most importantly, honor the community that we have, and knowing that we can make it through anything, whether it is Katrina, whether it's Zeta, whether it's the pandemic, whether it's Ida. As a community, we can move forward together, but we have to remember those that we lost and the impacts of these storms.
People living in St. Bernard Parish say it was the resilience of the school systems, the first responders, and the people that brought back everything after the storm. Also at the ceremony, the Chalmette High School Choir, they sang the Star-Spangled Banner. And then 1 year ago, Hurricane Ida destroyed homes and businesses, especially in the Lafitte area. Many are still rebuilding their lives back, though there are residents in Lafitte who are still picking up the pieces left behind by Ida. Progress is tremendous. Many residents have made repairs, though Mayor Tim Kerner Jr. says there are about 40% of Lafitte's population, and that is displaced, and he says he's disappointed in the federal government's response after the storm.
If the state of Louisiana wasn't coming down to help us, if it was up to the federal government, we would have nothing. These people, all the human suffering, all the devastation, this community would be the only community in the state of Louisiana with nothing.
Lieutenant Governor Billy Nungesser commented on how the state has come a long way with their disaster plans, but there is still some changes that need to be made.
Disaster preparation has been a lot better, both by the state and the federal government. But I think here in Louisiana, we're going to have to find a way to house our people better and not wait for FEMA trails. We're working with our state parks to put in-ground sewage so we can get some rental cabins or something so these people have somewhere to stay close to home as the rebuilding begins.
Coming up, a report from our nation's capital about how the Inflation Reduction Act promises to help depressed communities through climate change, and we'll have an update to Jackson, Mississippi's big water problem. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
This is your local election headquarters.
Low-income and minority neighborhoods often bear the worst impacts of climate change and pollution, but the government aims to start addressing those issues through money provided by the recently passed Inflation Reduction Act. Alexandria Limon reports on the efforts to provide environmental justice.
There are communities that are suffering from pollution disproportionately.
That's because polluting industries often border low-income and minority neighborhoods. EPA Administrator Michael Regan says the Inflation Reduction Act dedicates about $60 billion to climate justice projects to address the problem.
We will deploy those resources to communities on the ground that are grappling with currently the impacts of climate change.
The money will be split up into three major categories: fighting pollution, access to affordable clean energy, and building resiliency to climate change. Block grants will be available for communities to fight pollution, and the government will do more to monitor and address emissions from places like airports, rail yards, and ports. David Smedick is with the nonprofit RMI, which focuses on clean energy and sustainability.
We need to make sure those investments are prioritized in communities that have been overburdened by energy costs and fossil fuel pollution.
And a new greenhouse gas reduction fund will be used to accelerate production of green energy, largely in disadvantaged communities. The Environmental Justice Plan also seeks to improve quality of life and resiliency by restoring coastal habitats, forests, and creating new green spaces in urban areas. In Washington, Alexandra Limon.
To our north, Jackson, Mississippi is in dire need of help as they are without clean drinking water and have been for more than a month. This week, President Biden announced an emergency declaration. Jesse Tenor gives us a look at this issue.
It's just scary because day to day we don't know what will happen.
Thousands of homes and businesses in Mississippi's capital city have little or no safe drinking water, following weeks of warnings to boil it before drinking. Now FEMA is on the ground
to see what their needs are.
Gracia Check, the FEMA administrator over Mississippi's region, says the emergency declaration President Biden approved Tuesday allows her team to help the city of Jacksonville with necessities, like bottled water distribution.
We would reimburse that. and including the manpower, the emergency protective measures that's involved in all of that.
Chuck says FEMA can also assist with makeshift repairs to the city's main water treatment facility after recent flooding slowed the process of pushing water out to customers.
Help support the state provide those immediate services.
But Mayor Chokwe Lumumba says his city faces water system problems like pump failures and short staffing it can't afford to fix.
This is a set of accumulated problems based on deferred maintenance that has not taken place over decades.
The EPA recently announced nearly $75 million from the bipartisan infrastructure law would go to Mississippi and urged officials to prioritize low-income communities and communities of color. Jackson is now more than 80% black, with about a quarter of its residents living in poverty. In Washington, I'm Jesse Tenor.
Up next, we'll have a look at the week ahead on your local election headquarters.
This is your local election headquarters.
All right, looking ahead to the coming week, the meeting where DCFS will be questioned will be in the Senate Health and Welfare Committee. That's at 10 a.m. on Tuesday at the Capitol. Again, we will be covering that, and there will be no Baton Rouge Press Club tomorrow due to the Labor Day holiday. Also on Tuesday, State Superintendent Cade Brumley will be talking about the future of education at 11:30 at the Executive Center. Thank you so much for joining us for This Week in Louisiana Politics. I'm Fred Childers. Stay safe, stay informed, and I'll see you next Sunday right here on your local election headquarters.